Literature is the written reflection or the written art of a culture. Before there was written language, the literature of a culture would have been sung, or stories would have been told from generation to generation. But each of our present day cultures has a written language. And the written histories and the written reflections of past generations and of current generations we refer to as the literature of each culture. We have genres or categories of literature. These are the different types of literature that we have. They're very, very simple. So here are the 5 basic genres of English literature. The first literary genre that we'll discuss is the short story, which is a description or a narrative which can be read at a single sitting. And you have the first part of this semester that is dedicated basically to the short story. Now there might be some question as to these very long short stories. Are they really novellas? Or very short stories? Are they really prose and not short stories? A description can be a short story. It might be more of prose. But conflict can be between a rock and another rock or a piece of water. If there's conflict, there's a story. And so it doesn't take a whole lot to have conflict. A&P, Secret Lion, Hills Like White Elephants, Story of an Hour, The Lottery, As I Stand Here Ironing, The Telltale Hearts, A Good Man is Hard to Find, and The Jilting of Granny. Fictional narratives are referred to as short stories. The Telltale Heart is fiction. I do not believe that Edgar Allan Poe ever buried anybody underneath the floorboards of his bedroom. That didn't happen. Non-fictional short stories are called essays. Some of you have already written a very short essay for me, and probably in your first writing assignment. Personal essay. The very good example of that is The Secret Lion. Poetry or prose. Poetry is more difficult to pinpoint. I've seen different definitions which really didn't give a whole lot of information. So this is kind of a personal definition. A compact presentation of extreme literal imagery, descriptive or symbolic language within a very short single reading. So to me, the definition of poetry is the most vivid image within the shortest period of time. So the poet is getting the strongest image or the strongest emotion from his audience in as few words as possible. Here we have a poem that gives you a definition of a poem. A poem is a present, you give it to yourself. Find one in the dusty book nestled on your shelf. You notice that this poem already has rhythm and rhyme. Find one in the face of a person you don't know. Feel one on a windy day. Hear a poem blow. See a poem in a mouse. Watch a poem run. Smell a breakfast poem when morning offers sun. You may think a poem is always made of words, but poems can be chocolate. Poems can be birds. Poems can be secrets or shouts upon the air. A poem is a present hidden, hiding everywhere. So Amy's poem about a poem insinuates that poems don't have to be written. However, if it's a genre of literature, it must be written. And Amy's example of a poem does have structure. It does have rhyme. Poetry without specific structure, such as rhyme, rhythm, or a specific length, is usually referred to as prose. The difference between prose and a short story remains somewhat undefined. So you might have a poem that's in free verse. We would just call it free verse, or a short piece of stream of consciousness, your thoughts. Usually we would refer to that as prose. But even something as long as Romeo and Juliet, which supposedly was written all in iambic pentameter, but not in perfect pieces of it. It's all rhyme. It's a one big long piece of poetry. Well, it's not really a poem. But things that are any piece that is beautifully written and very descriptive and poetic in its use of imagery, oftentimes is referred to as prose. So those gray areas are just that, gray areas. Drama. This one's very, very easy. Drama is a written narrative intended to be read or performed. What we know now is theater, when we go to the theater and we see a play, or we even go to a movie and we enjoy a screenplay, or we watch television and we see a telenovela, or we see a situation comedy that has a script, that is scripted. That is drama. It's intended to be performed. And all of this comes from the morality plays, which were performed from the ancient Greeks and Romans. So here's some illustrations. Death of a Salesman. I have Paul Newman there from Our Town. There's Romeo and Juliet. There's a scene from Hamlet. He's about to kill his uncle, but he doesn't. I put To Kill a Mockingbird here, which is one of these pieces that goes to the different areas. It was a movie, it's been a play, but it was originally a short novel, so it could have been a novella too. But in this sense, when we see Gregory Peck and the lovely lady here, this is from the movie. So it's a screenplay. It is still drama. It is written work that is meant to be performed. A novel. A novel is a lengthy written contemplation of multiple stories, most often uniting corresponding elements of literature at a climactic moment or a climactic event. Say I was writing a novel about you and me and all the students who were taking English 1302, and all of us had different lives. So we would probably pick, we couldn't do everybody, but say we had 4 people. And so we'd have student A, student B, student C, and the teacher. And we would have our separate lives. But then we would come together at the moment of the final exam, and somehow we would email each other and have some kind of an epiphany, and the world would change, and this would be the climax. Well, the novel would be the contemplation of these stories and take a long time to read. Somebody can read a novel in a day, but When's a good example. It's very long, War and Peace. These are long pieces, especially older novels. Now, again, there's a great area. We're going to read the things they carried. I'm claiming it's a novella because it's shorter. It's not really a novel, but it's a contemplation of different stories or different chapters. James Joyce's Dubliners I have here. We're going to read Araby, which is from that. So Araby is taken out as a short story. So Dubliners is really a contemplation of different short stories. And I don't even know that these people even ever come together, as I said in my definition of what a novel is. But they do have a unifying element of sorts. And a novel is a long book. Okay? A novel is considered usually to be a work of fiction. If it is not a work of fiction, then it's a history or a biography. It would not be considered a novel. The novella, easy definition, is a mini novel. Stephen King, who wrote my favorite novel, which is Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption, defines a novel as less than 75,000 words, and he's written many novels, so I think he knows the difference between the two. So here's examples of novellas. There's the one I discussed before, Stephen King's Shawshank Redemption. You'll see it was originally published as part of an anthology called Different Seasons. Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried. It's also an anthology of stories. Your textbook is what we consider an anthology, but it's not an anthology like a novel. It has it's an anthology of these different genres. You've got poetry, you've got short stories, you've got novellas and dramas. You don't have a full novel because a novel would be too long to put into your anthology, your textbook. I think the best example of a true novella I've put here is Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, because you deal with one old man, you deal with nature, the sea, and the elements of the sea, and then a big marlin, a fish. And I don't know if you can see the picture there, but there's a fish and a man in a boat. And that's it. That makes it easier to say that you have one central character in a novella, but that's not necessarily true. The death of Ivan Ilyich. Ivan dies, and it's how his family reacts to his illness. So you have the one central character. Whereas in a novel, as I said before, you'll have more than one protagonist. You may have central protagonist, but you'll have more than one central character because it's so lengthy. You can do that. So, jot this down. Make sure you know these things. I'm sure you'll see it on a test one day, if not for me, for someone else. The genres of literature: short story, poetry, drama, novel, and novella.